this is the first thing when it comes to Russia. We had this report about Russia evacuating from Tartus. Tartus is a strategic naval base in Syria on the coastal line. Now, this happened several days back, and the report is saying that, well, Russia is actually withdrawing from these areas, taking away some of their ships. And the naval's base in Tartus, which is again considered a very strategic base, is now getting emptied. So what's happening exactly? The report said the Russian Navy base at Tartus in Syria appears under imminent threat as civil war turns against the Assad regime. As the front lines withdraw closer, Russia is already taking precautions. Russia currently has 5 naval ships and a submarine based in Tartus. These comprise of 2 Gorshkov class frigates, 1 Grigorovich class frigate, and 2 auxiliaries, and an improved Kilo class submarine. One of these vessels, Yelnya, was noted departing Tartus in the morning of December the 2nd, with information suggesting that some or all of the other vessels also left. This unexpected move comes several days into a sudden change in the situation in Syria's ongoing civil war. The Assad regime, of which Russia is a key ally, is now on the back foot. Opposition forces are rapidly advancing towards the capital. Although unconfirmed, this ship movement is considered likely to be directly related to the situation on the ground. Indeed, it is, because the rebel forces showed them controlling Russian bases that had Russian soldiers inside of them. And there have been confirmations from Russia warning people, Russian people inside of Syria, to leave Syria, asking everyone in Syria to leave. So we are indeed witnessing a move of Russia leaving strategic locations in Syria. We're not talking about all of them and evacuating everything all at once, but there is a massive move here coming from Russia, especially with the proof and evidence coming from the ground. So that's from the Russian side. Going back to the map that we were speaking about. Now, Tartus is in this area. Okay, so the Russians are leaving from this area over that hasn't been yet under the control of the armed opposition. What's happening with Iran then? Well, there have been videos published by Iranians in some of the locations they are present in Syria, saying that the Iranians are leaving. It's not that they're not sending more people to help, they are leaving Syria. And although we have statements that we're going to support Syria with whatever we can, we had a meeting between the foreign ministers of Syria, Iraq, and Iran, and they had a conference. Iraq, she said, we will support Syria with whatever we can. However, what do you mean by with all of our force? Excuse me, he said. But what does he mean without all of our force, without elaborating? Especially that on the ground, Iran is leaving certain areas in Syria. And we had also confirmation coming from Hezbollah, traditional ally of the Assad government, saying that they support, the official Syrian government. But again, they are not present inside of Syria. Now, a big analysis or a big assumption here when it comes to Russia, at least, or the side supporting Syria in general, is the fact that, well, if the Syrian forces are leaving their locations, withdrawing and allowing the armed opposition to storm in without them fighting them, then why should we fight on your behalf? There have been reports coming from Russia saying that the Syrian army is leaving these locations. So long as we don't see fighting coming from the Syrian army, proper fighting from the Syrian army, then we won't be deploying forces. And mind you, Hezbollah, of course, just went out of a massive war with Israel. They inflicted a lot of damage inside of Israel. However, they also received blows with, of course, the Secretary General being assassinated by Israel. And when it comes to Iran, they have been supporting this front against Israel all of this time. But the whole argument was that Syria is a strategic location. So how comes they are taking these moves when it comes to Syria? And like I mentioned in my previous video, is there an underlying understanding and agreement between Iran and the traditional allies of the Assad government and the opposition in Syria that haven't been declared? And we would understand why they won't be declared, because they wouldn't want to be seen as switching sides all of a sudden when it comes to al-Assad, especially with the changing dynamics when it comes to the opposition in the past 10 years in Syria. Are they having an agreement with them when it comes to the supply line? That might be the case, especially with the level of ineffectiveness that we're talking about from the Syrian army. That has been proven, by the way, because the Syrian officials are trying to say that, no one is actually, we don't have this massive retreat, and there's a lot of fake propaganda. However, when it comes to, some of the key figures inside of Syria, one of these people is Rami Makhlouf, who's the cousin of Bashar al-Assad and a senior figure in the regime, in the Syrian government. He is basically offering people, he actually posted a video on X, actually offering money to people to fight for the government. He's saying, forgive us if we have made mistakes before. We have made mistakes before, that's correct. But now it's not the time to have, talk about these disagreements. We apologize for the mistakes, but now we are facing a war, and we need you to fight for us. What does that indicate? That indicates that there is indeed a lack of willingness from the Syrian army to fight for Assad, and also that there are very big numbers of people defecting. Again, debunking the narrative that is being pushed by some of those who support Assad, that they're basically mass killing all of the forces, because there have been videos of armed opposition groups indeed offering the Assad forces to, that's it, just put your weapons down, come to our side, and that's it. We're not looking to have revenge or anything, but if you go ahead and fight us, then we will fight you. And statements coming from someone like Rami Makhlouf, who is a key figure in the Syrian regime, and a very powerful figure in Syria, who is allied to Bashar, and of course his cousin too, asking the residents to go and fight and offering them money for civilians to fight. These things prove that indeed the Assad forces are suffering heavily, and there are big numbers of people defecting and leaving the Assad forces for the sake of protecting themselves or moving towards the opposition. Because again, we're not seeing a lot of battles, a lot of confrontations. We're not seeing these massive crimes, and there appears to be a bigger scare campaign than what is actually being indicated, right? So that's a very important thing here to highlight, because if the Assad forces are not able or are not willing to fight when it comes to defending themselves or actually standing up against the armed opposition, then you're talking about a very big problem when it comes to the support of the traditional allies of Syria, primarily Russia and Iran. Russia and Iran, it doesn't appear that they will be stepping in anytime soon. Another country that we expected or heard that is going to be helping the Assad government was Iraq. But again, Iraq, you have a massive split when it comes to supporting Assad or not. And again, and I mentioned that in a previous video, top figures in the Popular Mobilization Forces, or what is known as the Hashd al-Sha'bi, they said that we will not go to Syria unless we are approved by the Ministry of Interior inside of Iraq. And the thing is here, when it comes to any potential Iraqi involvement inside of Syria, we have a zone here controlled by the United States of America. This location here is under the control of U.S. forces. Now, you might ask, why is the U.S. allowed to have these forces inside of Syria for such a long time? Another question. However, they are here. Where are they? On the borders between linking Iraq, Jordan, and Syria. Why are the American forces based here? So that they can prevent or potentially put at bay any potential move from Iraq to Syria, because the closest route from Iraq to Syria would be from the edge of the edge of the Iraqi-Jordanian borders. They would move here from this route down to Damascus. Otherwise, they would have to go through alternative, much longer routes, and that would not make sense for them. That wouldn't make sense for them. Clearly, something is happening that is bigger than what is being published in all of this. And we're having more statements coming from or based upon Kurdish movements here that they are or would be willing to accept a country that is a Syrian country, no more independence aspirations, so long as there is one state for everyone with equal rights. And of course, there are a lot of questions about all of this, especially with the fact that the shape or image of Syria hasn't really been guaranteed that much when it comes to the armed opposition. Recently, CNN, they had an interview with Al-Jolani, who actually revealed his name now. His name is Ahmed al-Sharh, in which he was saying that everyone will be protected inside of Syria, and but he did not really elaborate too much when it comes to, for example, free elections or anything of the sort, and lack of clarity when it comes to these things. That does not really provide assurances for the days after what's happening. And he also mentioned that we're willing to dismantle HTS, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that has again evolved with name after name, saying that this structure is based for a temporary time, and then our aim is to liberate all of Syria. And now we are conducting these operations under these specific movements when it comes to Syria. How is Israel viewing all of this? Because, like I said, we're talking about opposition control in these areas. They could go up north and control most of the borders with the occupied Golan Heights. And then, of course, with the armed opposition storming in from the north, we might have more areas being controlled altogether inside of Syria. And it appears to be that this is where things are going. However, the battle over Homs would be a very significant contributor, and it would potentially say and indicate whether Damascus would indeed be taken by the opposition or not. And that is becoming a very big likelihood now. When it comes to Israel, Israel is now showing more worries when it comes to the opposition, and we're having more reports coming from Israel. And what I wanted to share with you in this video primarily is an article that was published in the Israeli newspaper Ma'arif by Lieutenant Colonel who's resigned, Amit Yagur. Amit Yagur, he published this article, and in this article he mentioned a couple of things that are very important when it comes to the prospects of having this situation inside of Syria. Excuse me, and what are the threats and what are the Israeli potential actions to be taken when it comes to the opposition and the prospect of them controlling areas in the northern parts, in the north and southern parts, majority parts of Syria. Not yet on the table. Israel has one solution on the drama in Syria. Again, Lieutenant Colonel Amit Yagur was a very senior figure in the Israeli army. And in the beginning, he is, of course, describing that the situation is intensifying. You know, they're having more control, the armed groups. And of course, it wouldn't be, you know, without them pushing for sectarian tone, typical arrogance and, you know, enemy tone when it comes to Syria, using these sectarian tones as if everything is sectarian in Syria, when in many cases could be far away from the truth. However, this is what I'm interested in. It seems, he said, it seems worth stating with an analysis of the main Israeli interests. Amit Yagur is describing the main Israeli interest when it comes to Syria. Number one, a different reality and a new order in the Middle East as an overreaching goal. Two, removing the Iranians from Syria and Lebanon permanently and cutting off the arms of the Iranian octopus, as he's describing them, in a way that will not allow Hezbollah to be rehabilitated as a preferred secondary goal. Then, three, preventing the establishment of an extremist Islamic legal state on the northern borders. Then, moving on to the fourth point, the absence of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of terrorist elements, or what Israel describes as terrorist elements. Five, preventing the rebels from penetrating into Israeli territory. So that is something that Israel is considering, preventing the rebels from penetrating Israeli territory. What are the solutions, or what are the strategic alternatives that can be identified? He added that here. Faced with these interests, three main strategic alternatives can be identified. Do nothing. That's the first thing. Sit on the fence and watch the battle of the giants between the Sunnis and the Shiites, divide in sectarian tone coming from Israel. Although we're not even hearing that sectarian tone now that much when it comes to Syria, apart from people outside, by the way. Inside, it's becoming less and less prominent. I mean, it was a prominent tone before. Now we're not having that much of a tone. And again, I'm basing that from the statements that are coming from the both the opposition and the government, and the government, the people supporting the government. The sectarian tone has been reduced because they know it's fooling. No, it's only playing to their enemies' hands. Whoever wins in Syria is the one with whom he will be forced to talk the day after. Okay, as in let things happen, let's see what happens, and good luck to both sides when it comes to Israel, so that they can see their opponents, fighting each other. That's a very important message for Syrians, by the way, and the importance of them reaching a resolution without too much bloodshed, and actually having a resolution finally for Syria to be a country for all of its inhabitants, with more, of course, though, freedom, liberty, and justice. Then he added, promote a defensive tactical move of a buffer zone in the Israeli-Syrian border area with the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon, and in the face of the expectation that the Sunni rebels, as he describes them, will also arrive in this area. And he's saying we already have one in Lebanon. Now, this could indicate that they might have something inside of Syria. So we're talking about potentially a limited invasion into further Syrian territories, apart from the Golan Heights, by the way, not just in the Golan Heights. Then he said, and that's an interesting thing here, to embark on a strategic move to help the Assad regime. This is the second time that something like this has been mentioned by Israelis, by the way, and one of them, I mentioned them yesterday, an extremely genocidal figure, suggesting to support Assad, saying that he is a weak enemy that we know. But now it's coming from a senior figure who was in the Israeli army, a lieutenant colonel, Amit Yagur, to help the Assad regime by preferring the old and familiar over the new and frightening, in order to prevent the establishment of an extremist Islamic state on our northern border. Again, Israeli terminology. That we don't take that terminology, but this is how they describe it. But he added, there is also a fourth strategic alternative that has not been discussed so far, and that is the both and alternative, an alternative that seeks to move beyond the binary thinking of black and white and take a different approach. According to this approach, Israel's goals: eliminating the Shiite resistance axis in Syria and Lebanon, preventing the rebels from reaching our borders, and establishing an extremist Islamic state near our communities, may indicate that Israel could strive to divide Syria as a single political entity and significantly reduce the size of the Iranian playing field. This is a direct indication that Israel could play a very big role in the division of Syria. And this is something very important for anyone talking about certain divisions within Syria. And that's why the unity, right, of all of Syrian land is very crucial, because dividing Syria has been a campaign that has been openly published by the United States and Israel, and now they're also confirming it. We had also campaigns with Iraq and even with Saudi Arabia and other locations too, with the new Middle East maps that were published post the Iraq war that wanted to split the area further when it comes to Syria and these locations. Now, these things are very important and are very dangerous at the same time. We can understand that from all of this, that the Syrian opposition is seeming unstoppable so far, with very limited confrontation coming from the Assad forces. There is undeniably a level of people defecting, leaving the Syrian army and moving with the opposition. There are also numbers of the people with the Syrian forces who are completely stopping the fighting altogether. And that's why we had Rami Makhlouf, who is a very close figure to Bashar al-Assad, offering money for civilians to fight. And mind you, he's offering money for civilians to fight in areas that are now under the control of the Syrian opposition. We're hearing a different tone from the Syrian opposition. That's also important. And we are also seeing a lack of support from Syria's traditional allies that, like I said before, could either be a total failure from their perspective, or a deal between them and an understanding with the opposition groups, especially coming based on their interests inside of Syria and Lebanon, to do with the resistance as well, that have not been declared so far. And the opposition wouldn't necessarily declare it because they wouldn't want to attract any more hostilities at the moment during this campaign that they're on, that they call the deterrence of aggression. And the opposing side would want to see how long the Assad forces could potentially, on their own, fight, especially before helping them with anything. Because from their perspective, if they are seeing the Assad forces retreating, the Assad forces handing themselves in, and we have seen images of that happening, then from a Russian perspective, then why should I go and die for you if you're not willing to die? Why should the Iranian go and die for you if you're not willing to die? What should the Iraqi go and die for you, or the Lebanese go and die for you when you're not willing to die for the government, right? Especially as Syria was a case that has divided and still does divide the world between a supporter of the opposition and a supporter of the Assad government. They faced problems. I mean, Iran and anyone who supported Assad lost a lot of popularity during their years of support. And from the opposition side, many in the opposition side were blamed of playing in the hands of the CIA, the Israelis, and other parties as well. Right. However, what's happening now is indicating that there are developments that are not really clear and haven't been published, but based on the developments on the ground, based on the reading from what's happening, this is what we can establish. Something very big is happening. The battle over Homs will be something significant. And again, it's something that is live and being updated by the hour. The advancement of the Syrian opposition has been massive. If Homs falls under the control of the armed opposition, then we are only one step away from Damascus. And the battle over Homs could indicate what will happen in Damascus. Homs was considered to be a very key strategic location that many thought the government would not let go of, like they thought the government would not let go of Hama, by the way, because Hama had an air base for the Syrian army that is now under the opposition control. And when you talk about Homs, that's it, one step away from the Damascus. What is left when it comes to Bashar al-Assad and his government? Things are developing in a very quick manner, a very rapid manner, and we will continue monitoring the situation and hopefully read through things to elaborate further and clarify further to try and understand where things are going. And of course, first and foremost, we hope and pray that the situation in Syria doesn't escalate to a level where we're talking about a bloody war with many innocent civilians dying. So far, we haven't seen anything significant when it comes to what's happening with the fighting between the opposition and the government forces so far. And again, a very good solution would be for the Syrians to get together, have a dialogue, discuss a day where they will agree on everything, and move on peacefully to the next stage with clarity for both the Syrian people and also the people who love Syria from across the world. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about in this video. And I will see you soon in the next video. Peace.